Well, I think the Great Bay Area has always been a very critical part of global trade, right? I still remember back 20, 30 years ago, right? The ports, right, in Hong Kong and Shenzhen, right, were one of the major paths of how goods from the factory of the world, right, is going to the West. I do think that, increasingly what I see is that some of the high-tech manufacturers, right, a lot of the Shenzhen technology companies, right, I think that they are actually using not only physical trade, but there's a lot of things like, innovation. There's a lot of things that they are also influencing global trade. So I do think that in the past, we have been physical goods in China, factory trading outside. In the future, part of this trade is going to be technology, ideas, IP, data, other things that we will be influencing global trade. So I do think that Greater Bay Area has always been great at trade. I think will be great at trade, but the nature of that trade might shift from just physical goods to also things that are beyond physical goods.
To start with, we know the world economy is full of uncertainties. So do you still believe the next China is in China?
Well, if you look at the economic growth of China in the last year and also projections of this year, China is still going to be between 32 to 34% of global growth. So one of the things that we fully believe that in the next 10 years, there is no other region, country, or other cooperation bodies that can replace the growth of China. As IMF said, Chinese growth is essentially the foundation of global growth. So when I said the next China is China, I fully believe that there was no substitute. So the next China is something else. The next China has to be China. But of course, we also need to find ways how to have more sustainable growth in the future.
Mm-hmm. So for the companies, should they keep investing in China? What opportunities China present for them? And how can they win in the next China?
Well, I've been talking to a lot of CEOs recently, and I think that a lot of CEOs are actually thinking hard around how to invest to build the next era for their companies. I do think it's different, right? I think in the past, it was a lot around volume. It was a lot around getting more penetration into lower tier cities. It was a lot around getting to scale. I do think that the next 10 years is a lot more around, we call it more granular growth, meaning that you find growth in very specific pockets, right? It's no longer one size fits all. I have a product, I get a lot of marketing, and everyone comes to my platform. I don't think that model works anymore. I think it's a lot more granular, it's a lot more specific, it's a lot more segmented. And I do think that for the companies that feel like they have the technology and the thinking to do that, they are investing because they still see a lot of growth. I still see a lot of entrepreneurs who are seeing a lot of growth right now in the market, although obviously it is a slowing growth.
Well, so for the multinational companies that already operating in China and probably will be entering the Chinese market, what strategies do you have for them? And what do you think the business environment in China and in Shanghai has evolved over the years?
Yeah, look, I think China has been such a wonderful growth market for multinationals in the past 20 years. I think many, many CEOs talked about having been in China for 20, 30, 50 years. And they have businesses at this stage that is between 15 to 50% of their global revenues are from China. So I think global companies have done very, very well in China in the last couple of decades, right? In the next coming years, I think all of them will have to think about how do they compete in the next decade, right? I think that some of the growth, some of the market penetration, they've already accomplished that in the past. The question is, how do I continue to grow? How do I continue to find propositions in a market where the local competitors are also growing up very quickly and are actually pretty good right now? So I do think that it will be a more challenging market for multinationals, but I'm also very confident that those that have been dedicated, focused, have the right talent, understand China very well, they will continue to do fabulously. I think that there is no other market that can replace the volume and the potential of the China market, but there will be some that will find it much more difficult. And there will be some that are just in any economy will not do as well. So there'll be winners and there'll be some losers. And the question is, how do we enhance our opportunity, the chances to be in the winners category?
So how do you think the business, especially like multinational business, can better adapt to today's environment?
Well, I think that we have to take uncertainty as a given. And I think that more we embrace that this is just the world is going to be like this for the next 20 years, and we better get used to that. The faster we are into that mindset, the better off we're going to be. In the last 1 or 2 years, we've been talking about a concept called the resilient company. What's resilient? Resilient means that, when there's a typhoon, when there's a storm, when there's a flood, when there's an earthquake, I can get through it, right? In the last few years, we've seen, COVID, we've seen different lockdowns, we've seen different geopolitics going on. I think companies have to kind of figure out, how do I respond quickly? How do I be more agile? How do I think about the difference between, long-term and short-term? How do I balance that? How do I, be more equipped to deal with uncertainty? And I think the muscle, right? The agility muscle, the resilience muscle is one where the more we exercise that, the better the companies can deal with, all this that we talked about. So I do think that, for multinationals and for Chinese companies, learning how to build up our resilience, I think it's probably one of the major lessons we've learned for the last couple of years. And I think likely will be the differentiation between who can get through the next storm and who cannot.